Well. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Write Your Narrative, a weekly podcast where we are discussing everything street art related happening in South Florida. I'm your host, Pascal D from Token of the Wall. This week, my guest is South Florida contemporary artist and muralist Nate Dee. His Haitian background can be appreciated in his colorful art as well as his murals painted all over South Florida and abroad. In his figurative paintings, his characters typically wear masks, covering partially their faces. Let's find out the inspiration and the meaning of it. We are today recording from Jolt Radio Studio in Alapara, and my guest is my good friend Nate Dee. Nate, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. I feel like it's been a while.
It's been a little while, but you've been so busy. You've been so busy.
Yes.
So many projects, so many things going on. You've been traveling a lot, probably.
Yes, I've been traveling. I'm still not at the point where I'm traveling as much as I was before the pandemic. I felt like I was barely ever here. But it started picking up like maybe the year after the pandemic. And then now, I'm in and out.
So that podcast is a part of the series Where Are They Now? You were on the cover of Token of the Wall in 2015.
Yes.
What have you done in 10 years, almost 10 years?
It's been so much. It's weird because it's one of those things where you do so much and you're just focused on getting the next project done that you don't really remember what you did until you start looking at like maybe your Instagram and looking at your posts. You're like, oh yeah, I did that, and I did that too. So in that time, I was teaching and doing art. Now I'm doing art full time, no longer teaching. So that's a plus. That's a blessing because the bills are still getting paid. you know? So that's a good thing. Another thing that I'm doing, just a lot of bigger projects, a lot of bigger walls. I've been doing a lot with F1. A lot with the Miami Open, which is good. I've also paired up with the Miami Heat. So I've been doing a lot of stuff with teams as well. And just the street art, it's just been taking me everywhere. Like I was just talking to you before we started, and I just came from Guadeloupe. Another thing that was amazing, which was like a kind of like, I've had a few full circle moments, but one of them was one of the things I've always wanted to do was go back to the country my family's from and paint. And I've had the opportunity to actually do that 3 times. I painted in Port-au-Prince twice, Haiti. And then the last time that I went, I was in this area in North Haiti called Cap Haitien, which is Okap. That's what the locals call it. And I did a mural there outside of the airport.
How would you describe your work to our listeners, the people who don't know you, who are not quite familiar with your work? You're talking about street art, but you don't do just street art.
Yeah, so I'm traditionally trained as a traditional studio painter. I got into street art and muralism specifically, I would say maybe 10 years ago. My work is definitely contemporary. It's a lot of figurative work, so it's a lot of people. The people typically have masks. They're either wearing masks or it's an illustration of an animal's face that kind of covers over part of the person's face, obscures part of the person's face. And then it's a mix of very modeled, realistic, three-dimensional looking images, and they're juxtaposed against a lot of flat graphic images. So I would say contemporary, urban, usually framed under the umbrella of culture. Usually I'm addressing culture, or I'm addressing the idea of power and how power is presented to the world around you.
So talking about the culture, you are Haitian born. You definitely represent your culture throughout Miami.
Yes, yes, I definitely do. I try to. I wear it on my back. I wave the flag as much as I was actually born here. As a child, I was in Haiti for a while, then came back here, and I grew up most of my life here. My family's from Haiti. My father was born in Haiti, came here during his college years and decided to stay here. My mother was born in New York, but her family's Haitian. And she went back to Haiti for schooling until she was a teenager, and then went back to New York from there.
You said in the magazine at the time, anyone can have a great technique, but you must know what you want to create to be able to do it. Art comes from the brain.
Yes. I still believe in that. I still agree with that. There is an element of inspiration, obviously, but I think that a lot of artists that I know who are frustrated with just their output, frustrated with their opportunities, frustrated with where their art is. It's because they sit and they just wait for this moment, this aha moment, this moment where, hey, I'm watching TV. Oh, a light bulb came off. I have an idea for a painting. And I don't think that creativity works like that. It's like a muscle. Like, we're all creative and, we all get blocks. And for me, at least, my way of working and my process is you need to work through that. So in order to work through that, that might mean that you go through 10 bad ideas before you get to the good idea. But the only way you get to the good idea is by editing out the bad ones.
I can see that. So when you start a piece, what is your personal thought process?
So usually I'll come up with an idea in terms of the themes that I want to play around with. Maybe it's a cultural goal. Like maybe I'm addressing my culture, or addressing someone else's culture, the reason why I'm doing it, for example. And then from there, I start sketching. I go from sketching, then I start going in and looking at reference images. I'm registered on a few of these copyright-free reference sites where you could pull photos, and then I'll look at those for more inspiration, and then I'll start mocking things up in Photoshop, and then I'll just keep messing around with it, adjusting it, changing it until it looks the way I want it to look, or until it's giving off that theme or that vibe I'm looking for. From there, that's when I'll sketch it out on canvas, or that might be the point where I decide, okay, this is good for this wall that I'm going to paint, and then I go ahead and execute it.
So most of your models are women?
Yes.
Most of them?
Yes.
Is that something that you feel stronger, giving some a special meaning to the mask, a special relationship with the mask and a female model? Is that something that you are?
Yes, I definitely get what you're saying. So in the beginning, I did a lot of men. And the only reason why I did a lot of men, mainly because, I was young, I was into hip hop culture, and it dealt with a lot of that. At that time, I wasn't doing the mass. I was focusing mostly on quotes that I would find from media, from literature, from things like that. And then what I would notice is that when I would get into gallery shows, when I get into group shows and things like that, a majority of the pieces were women, but the way they were displayed were very interesting. It's almost like the person was robbed of their power. And what made me decide to do the mask is that whole idea of power. Like, the person wearing the mask is basically showing the world that the power that they have within them. It's usually framed under cultural references. So with that being said, what I notice is art history has a long visual narrative of women seen as a subject, seen as submissive, seen as an object, seen without a voice. So it was kind of my way of pushing back against that idea and showing these women with power and giving these women the voices, not even giving them their voices, because they already have a voice, right? So it was me paying tribute to that voice. And that's what made me start painting, at one point, exclusively women. Now I paint a little bit of everything. I've noticed a lot of the later pieces have been children. I don't know why. Maybe it's just somewhere in my life that I'm at, because I don't have any kids. But subconsciously, I've just been gravitating to images of children. And I'm still painting a lot of women. A lot of them are women I know. I tend to choose the women that I know who kind of, for some reason, remind me of the theme or the idea that I'm going for, because I kind of want it to be true to whatever the object and the subject is.
But the mask representation, how do you decide which mask goes with a certain model, certain things? This is what you're doing, this is the process, this is the special meaning you want to give to your model?
Yes. So I choose the animals based on what we as people imbue with meaning on the animal. So a lot of times people say, oh, they're wearing animal masks. I'm like, yeah, it kind of looks like a mask, but it's almost like more of an idea, So like, for example, if I give you an animal, you're going to have a million things that animal represents to you. Like, for example, if I say a lion, you're going to think king, you're going to think majestic, you're going to think power, you're going to think strong. If I say eagle, you might think America, or you might have other meanings, And then, like, for example, I did a piece and it had to do with Haiti. So in Haiti, one of the important animals is the Hispaniola trogon. And because of that, that's why I chose that animal. Or it might be an animal that's native to the area that I'm painting. So for example, I did a piece when I was in Iowa, and they have a lot of owls. And owls have a lot of meanings over there that are kind of divorced from what we might think of owls. Like we might think of them as wise, but they have Native Americans over there and things like that. So because of that, that's what I'll use to kind of choose the animal. I choose the animal based on what the meaning is behind the painting.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the tattoos I have, which are mostly eagles, because originally from France, I came here in the US, and the eagle was the representation for me of the American culture,
Yes.
the strength, and then the power. So I can totally relate to that with my tattoos.
Yes, yes.
You have any tattoos? No?
No, I don't. I think it's because I'm a creative. I have no tattoos.
You don't have it?
Every time
You would be too picky.
Well, yeah, that's the
choosing
thing.
something,
Anything that I would do, I'd probably hate it within a week. Like I tell my friends, like out of everything I paint, I only love like maybe 30% of it if I come back and look at it like a few weeks later, a month later, or a year later. But other than that, I start picking it apart because that's just the artist in me. I'm going to be really critical with my work and my output. So I'm always like, at the time I might do it, I'm like, this looks great. And then I'll look at it, like someone will post it online and then tag me, and I'll look at it, I'm like, so there's something I always say when people were like, is it done? I'm like, I don't know if there's ever any painting that's done. I always tell people like, I don't know if it's done, but I know I'm done, you know? And then I kind of leave it at that.
That's one of the questions I ask quite often. Say, how do you know? When do you decide my painting or that mural is done?
Yeah. It's very hard, but I've learned that you have to restrain yourself, because it gets to the point where if they give you a month to do it, you will take a month. If they give you 3 weeks to do it, you'll take 3 days, 3 weeks. If they give you a day to do it, you can do it in a day. So with that being said, you just have to kind of know when you get to that point where you're like, okay, time to finish. Because you could also overwork the painting and mess it up, right? You don't want that either.
Do you think the viewer will know if the painting is really messed up? Would they know? How would they know?
I don't think they will. I think that maybe if it's another artist, they might see where there might be areas that could be worked on more.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, I do that sometimes, especially if I'm familiar with a person's work and I'll see them do like 3 murals and they're really strong murals, and I'll see one mural that they do and I'm like, this one's not as good as the last 3 that he did or she did. I could tell they cut corners here, they cut corners there. And I'm sure people do that to me too. I try not to cut corners just because my whole thing is, if you can't control what people look at, if you can't tell them, okay, look at this piece, look at that piece, look at the one I have on this street, then you have to try to make all of them as strong as you can, you know, so that there's no doubt, you know, in terms of your talent, your skills and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think the general public doesn't know, because there's times where people come in and they're like, you're done. I'm like, I'm done. This is whack. Like, come back tomorrow. If you think I'm done now, come back in 2 days, because no, like take a picture, but please put #work in progress.
Work in progress, yes.
on there somewhere, please.
No, it is not done. It is not done. Mm-hmm. Actually, did you start it with murals or did you start it with paintings?
I started with paintings, really. Like I knew about murals, and I was introduced to murals because when I was in high school, I had a lot of friends who did graph. And I can't even say murals, but I was introduced to graffiti, right? So I had a lot of friends who would go, and this is like post-Andrew, where there was still areas in Hialeah where there was whole neighborhoods that were still wrecked, and there were graveyards and just like husks of buildings that were over there. And we would go there because the police wouldn't arrest us, no one would mess with us, and we would just spray paint in there. And my friends, they all did lettering and stuff like that. And me, I was, you know, the kid who loved comic books. So they used to always come and say, okay, I'm going to do this word here. Why don't you throw any of your characters on there? So that was kind of like my first introduction to it. When I got to college, I stopped doing that completely. I think part of it was, I remember I got in trouble. I did when I was in middle school, we had a racquetball court at my middle school, and I remember I did a bunch of characters on the middle school, and then my mother saw it, and then one day she came, she's like, let's go for a drive. I said, okay, cool. And then I hopped in the car, and then she drove me over there, and then she started staring at me, and she's like, did you do this? And then she's like, I recognize those characters, and I said, yeah. She's like, yo, you do that again, I'm gonna call the police on you. Like, you know, Caribbean parents, they're tough, you know?
Yeah.
So they're black and white, not a lot of shades of gray. So at that point, I didn't do it as much, and I just really focused on the studio work. I had a professor when I was in undergrad. Her name was Pip Brandt, and she introduced me to what they called the lowbrow art scene at that time. And that's when I realized what, like in terms of the variety of what you can paint, it's really wide open. Because that was the first time I saw people painting stuff that I recognized. It wasn't like the super traditional still life or like the portraits from the masters and stuff like that, where I'd see they'd have like, I don't know if you know, like Todd Shore. I'm trying to think of other artists from. So they did a lot of stuff, and they used a lot of popular imagery in their artwork, but they approached it in a very traditional way of doing it. Like, so that's what really got me into painting, because before that I was into just sketching, drawing, illustrating, and things like that. And from there, I did that through undergrad, and then when I got out, I started getting opportunities to do walls. I always said no.
Always said no?
Yes, initially I said no because it was that fear of failure, right? To my credit, every time people ask me who got you into doing the walls and who got you into doing murals, there was an artist that was like, she had all the walls in Wynwood at the time. Her name was Kazilla. And she used to do a show, I think it was called Multiversal. It was during Basel, and she had it at the Armory. I don't even know if the Armory's there anymore. And then she had it at a couple of other different places. And it would be a pop-up show that she would do, and it would feature street artists. It would feature pop artists, it would feature graffiti artists, and it'd be work on canvas. And one year she did it in Wynwood, and she had an agreement with the gallery owner, and it was a big building, and he said you could paint the walls. So I remember I dropped off my work, and she said, Nate, I have a wall. This person has a wall. I'm going to save you a wall. I said, Kaz, you know I don't do walls. She's like, you're crazy. Your work will look good on walls. You're going to do a wall. And I was like, Kaz, I'm not doing a wall. She's like, listen, Nate, I don't want to hear it. I'm going to be here tomorrow.
You better
painting
show up.
A wall. You better show.
You better show up.
Exactly. She said, "Listen, other people wanted the wall, and I said no to them because I'm holding this wall for you. Do not waste this wall." And then that's when I did it for the first time. I mean, the piece that I did wasn't even big. It was maybe 4 feet by 4 feet. And the wall was like way bigger than that, right? But I wanted to do something that I was comfortable with. But at that point, that's when I saw people were coming up to me, talking to me, interacting with me, asking me to talk about the piece I was doing. That was one of my first mass pieces. And I just fell in love with that aspect of it because I was so used to being in the studio alone in isolation with your thoughts and not really knowing how people are going to receive it, right?
Yeah, this is exactly how you connect with the public through the public art.
Yes, with the viewer, it's just I love that experience so much. So doing that, and then what I also noticed is every time I did one wall, it would lead to another wall. So I was constantly working because of it, right? So like I did that wall, and then from that wall, it led to the next wall that I did, which ended up at Tobacco Road before they closed. To give you an idea how long ago that was.
It was.
And I remember I did a wall there on it was like on a wooden fence that they had in the back, and the owners loved it, and they ended up letting someone else paint over it, and they hated what the person did. So then they were doing like their big. You remember when they had that big bash when they were finally shutting down for good? They invited me out there to paint like one of their. They had a big outdoor refrigerator, and then I painted that one. And then the New York, was it the New York Post or the New York Times picked it up, and it ended up on one of their articles where they were talking about the closing, and that was like the main image. And people were hitting me up. You're in the you're all over the newspaper in New York, And then from there, that just kept leading to other things and other opportunities.
That's so strange how we mention Kazilla one more time in the podcast. It's the third time that we mentioned her. 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with Yuval, and we mentioned Kazilla. A couple of weeks before, I was with Coinslot, and we mentioned Kazilla. It's just like, Where is Godzilla in the world?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Yes, we heard some stuff, but yes, who knows?
Yeah, last I saw her was like maybe 2 years ago, and she was working on a mural during Basel. But I saw her in a video online. Like, it wasn't even 2 years ago because it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, no, that was longer.
So it was like
than that.
over 4 years ago.
That was longer than that.
She was with Aqua.
With Aqua, yes, and then she was also
and Claudia.
Okay, I
Claudia.
remember this wall over
It was
there, yes.
on the main street, on the main strip.
Yeah, but after that, she painted with the few and far.
Yeah, I know she was
Also-
doing work with them, but I never saw her after that. That was the last time I saw her. And there's a few people like here on like that were doing stuff on the street art scene that like were very key important people on my journey, and she's one of them. Her, Trek 6.
Yes.
Another person, he gets all the flowers to me.
He does, and I know he
all the
listens to the
flowers.
podcast.
All the flowers. Like I always tell Trek this, and I don't know if he understands this. Like, I learned so much from him just from being in shows with him, and then literally the show is going on and people are like networking and all that, and Trek is in the back just sharing his knowledge with me. You know, my first big wall I ever had got, and it was a big city project, and I had no idea how I was going to tackle it because at that point I hadn't used projectors. I wasn't too good at using a grid at the time, so I used to do all my murals off a site. And that building was 3 stories high, and it was one of those buildings where you can't even see the edges of the building when you're up on it. And I needed to get a lift, and it was crazy. And I literally
Building in Broward?
It was in Broward,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And then I remember I saw him a week before that, and I was telling him how much trouble I was having, like just trying to wrap my mind around how I'm gonna get this done. And then he said, listen, I'm doing a huge mural. And it was a huge mural. And it was on the back of a school off of the highway. And he said, come out and just watch me paint. And then I went out, and then he started explaining to me his thought process. He's like, you got to use everything as reference. He was using the windows. There was a parking lot in front of it with a bunch of parking spaces. He's like, the parking spaces are my reference. The trees are my reference. The windows on the building are my reference points. You use that, you superimpose an image on a photo of the wall, and you're good. And that's what I did, and it worked. Because I remember how frustrating it was for me in the beginning trying to learn. And between Trek, and I remember even Dee Dee, because her and I learned under the same person
Yes.
at FIU. And with Dee Dee, she was like, yo, come out and watch me paint. I was like, I'll help you paint, because she was using, at that time, I hadn't used spray paint in so long, and I wasn't that good at using spray paint, but her style was close enough to mine that I was like, how are you using spray paint and brush paint? She was like, just come and watch. And I watched her for an hour and helped her. And then from there, I was like, oh, I got this.
I got this,
Okay.
yes.
And she's like, yeah, I know you got this, you know? So she's another one. And she's also one of the people who pushed me to just like, yo, just do the art full time. You can do this, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's, like I said, there's a few touchstones on my journey, and any chance I get to give them their respect, give them their flowers, I'm always going to do that and always going to recognize.
Someone also kind of helped you and pushed you. That was Suki and
Yes.
Maddie at the time.
Yes, so Suki.
they were like,
yes, Suki and Maddie. So what I loved about
Where are they
them,
now?
they're in Central Florida now.
Yeah.
Last I saw them, but what I loved about them is that there was galleries that I was applying to and submitting work to, and I wasn't getting any responses. And it's specifically because of Suki and Maddie that these people actually were looking at the emails and seeing the work. And they're like, how come I haven't heard of you? I'm like, I submitted a few times, but you know, they probably get bombarded anyway, you know, like by a million artists. So I was thankful that they put in the good word, and because of that, it made these people say, all right, I have a million emails, but I'll look at this one because Suki and Maddie tell me I should look at this artist.
Yeah.
You know?
And Maddie told me, you have to have Nate on the cover of the magazine.
I can see that.
Oh,
Maddie's,
yes. Oh,
Maddie's
Maddie
one
was-
of my biggest fans
Oh,
from day
yes.
one, you know?
You have to
from
have
day
him.
one, yeah.
What are you waiting for? You have
Yeah.
to have Nate on the cover of the magazine.
I remember when I met her, I was painting for the pop-up piano project, and then she walked into the studio, and then at that time, I didn't know Evoca, although he had met me before, and he remembered me, but I didn't remember him. And then Ron was there also painting, and that was the first time seeing them, and I knew their work, you know. So I'm like, oh, like I'm like the little local guy, like, so I'm not saying anything, and people are coming in seeing that, and I'm just like minding my business in the corner painting. And that's when I remember Suki and Maddie came in to check Evoca, and she walked up to me and she was just looking at my piano, and she's like, I like this. And I said, thanks. And then she's like, well, explain it to me. And I was explaining the theme and why I did what I did and all the symbolism that was on it. And then she's like, why haven't I ever heard of you? And I was like, I don't know. I'm out here trying though.
Yeah.
You know? And then from then she just started inviting me to stuff where I was like meeting like people on the inner circle and people were getting to know me, and by them getting to know me, they also got to see my work too. So it helped a lot. And I don't even know if she realized what she was doing, but...
Yeah, 10, 12 years ago, they were huge in the community.
Yes.
They were really
Yes.
some driving forces. They were going to every shows, and Suki with his Instagram post and everything was on top
Gully
of
art.
everything.
Yes.
Gully art, it
Gully
was on
art.
top
Yes.
of everything.
It's true. It's true.
And then people got tired of Winwood.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's the nature of the beast, right? Like, things are always the most pure and the most interesting in the beginning. And then from there, you know, other people see opportunities and see a different vision for what the area is or what the place is or what the thing is even, right? So after a while, it evolves, and not always in a good way. Sometimes it might be in a good way to the people who weren't there for the beginning, so they didn't see where it came from, you know?
Yeah.
But those in the beginning who saw what it was and saw the substance of it, you know, then that's when it's almost like you're going through a little bit of a mourning because you see the loss every time you see what it's become.
Yeah. Well,
know?
it's called, the growing pains, I call it usually.
Yes, yes.
So right now you had a show that opened at the Dorsey House.
Yes. So I'm actually really excited about this. The director of Muse 305, they had a campus in Little Haiti, and they also do programming. They do events. They do a lot of cultural programming in the community here in Little Haiti, here in Alapata, Central Miami, and also down south, like in Richmond Heights, and areas where people aren't exposed to arts. So they had the idea that they wanted to do a show, and specifically a group show, at the D.A. Dorsey House, because one of the reasons is it's a historical house and what the house represents in Overtown. The fact that it is in Overtown, the fact that it was owned by the first black millionaire who lived in Miami, who came here as a worker and made his millions and then ended up buying a bunch of property. And that's one of the places he bought. He actually bought that place for his wife as a gift.
Yes, we talked about 1915. I had to do a little bit of research.
Yes.
Quite some time ago, yes, when Miami was not even Miami yet. It was like, okay.
Well, this was like the Jim Crow South back then. There was segregation. So, like, a lot of people who came to work here on the Flagler Railroad, workers, they had nowhere to stay.
They were workers, yes.
Yeah, they had nowhere to stay, or they had to stay far away and then try to travel to where they were working on the railroad. So what he did was he saved money. He started building up a savings and started buying properties, and he started renting them out and leasing them out to the people who were here to work on the railroad. And from there, he was making more money, and as he amassed his fortunes, he'd use that to give back to the community, to purchase land that the community could use and things like that. So that's one of the reasons why they chose this space. Now, the show is a group show. It's called On the Bandwagon, and it kind of deals with the idea of censorship. And then there's a war on culture that's going on right now in the United States, right? So people give you a bunch of reasons why it has to happen and why it doesn't have to happen, but at the end of the day, information is being hidden.
Yes.
And the show is about, and it's not new, by the way. This is a pendulum that swings back and forth. So the show literally explores the idea of the historical banning of information and banning of knowledge and censorship. Specifically where we're seeing it now, especially here in Florida, because of just the way politics are here, is in our books and books for school children and things like that. So there's a lot of fear around that and what they're learning and what they think they're learning. A lot of it's hype. Me being someone who's formerly from the educational system, a lot of these things that are happening aren't really happening on a whole. It might happen with some weird professor or weird teacher in one location, but they paint the picture like it's an entire school district doing it, right? So it's exploring the idea of banning books, because banning books isn't something that's new. It's happened since the beginning of time. I mean, the Catholic Church was doing it, right? Yes. So that gives you an idea of how long it is, how long this legacy is. So the show is on that. We have specific books, like I have a piece in the show based on Fahrenheit 451 and a couple of other books. There's a book called The Hate You Give. if you look at the list of books, because we had a bunch of meetings before he met with all the artists, and he just started talking about the number of books that have been banned throughout Florida in schools. And some of them, it doesn't even make sense why they're banned. And it's also the idea that one person can decide what an entire school district learns. So the way the law is written, everyone in the school district might like it, but if one parent doesn't like it, then the book can be reviewed and kicked out. And that's what's happening.
I heard about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's kind of crazy to me.
It totally is crazy.
That things, but it's like that with everything. Like things might start out and there might be a good idea for the reason why you want to do it, but then too many people get a hand of it and that mob mentality turns it to something else and it becomes very extreme. But yeah, so like that's what the show is about. So like each artist that's in the show has a different room in the house, and we decide to tackle a different aspect of the overall theme. And then I'm really excited about the show just because everyone knows me for my paintings. Yes. When they came to me, they said, we want you to knock this thing out and do paintings in a mural. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. But that's what you guys know me for. Like I want people to understand that that's not all that I do. So what I really loved about this is they kind of let me do whatever I want. And some of the pieces I have in there were after discussions with Bart, who's the director of Muse 305. And with that, we did installations, and this is the first time I've had like really dedicated installations that are pieces that I feel are really strong and are center points within the conversation and in the theme that's going on. Initially, I'm not going to say any names because I don't want to politicize this, right?
It's not necessary, no.
Initially, a lot of the people who were pushing this, right, they're saying it's about sexual development. The power to control that narrative should be with the parents. It shouldn't be with the kids. This is what it's about. We want these kids learning this stuff at home. And then when you start seeing the books that are getting banned, they're books on politics, certain types of political aspects or political approaches. There was one book, I think it was Let's Go to Cuba or something like that. That book got banned. Okay. Books that have to do with Black history, poetry books written by Black authors, books on Hispanic history, that's getting deleted from the classroom, deleted, yes. So it's kind of crazy because, again, it's one of those things where there's an argument that starts, but at the end of it, and then when you see them reach the goal, I'm like, well, what really is this about, right? Yeah. Like, what are we really doing here? So I find it very strange, but also very interesting and worth, exploring in the art.
Well, so Nate, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Unfortunately, we have to stop the conversation. There is so much more I would love to talk with you.
Yes, 10 years traveling.
Thank you, Maddie.
Yes, thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Suki.
One more time, Suki, Trek, Kaz, all these people.
Kaz, Professor Chang.
Yes, and everybody in Miami it's such a close group of friends. Some people move in and out, but still, once in a while, we all love to meet at Win 317, one of our favorite galleries.
Yes. I love those ladies, by the way.
Oh, yes.
They're amazing.
Yes. They are doing such an amazing job.
And they're doing something that not a lot of people are doing anymore. Like, they were doing the street art scene when it was hot, but now it's still hot, but now the attentions are going a lot of different ways, but they're still staying true to the way they started, and they're still producing really good, strong shows. Like
they really, really are.
Yeah, I remember my last solo I did with them. It was greatly attended. The show did well, and it was just quality, And I think that that's important when you deal with people who are professional and they care about the quality of things too.
Well, it's all about caring and sharing, and this is what I really want to do with this podcast: is going back in time and bringing some new informations. Keeping the art scene alive, which is very, very alive in South Florida, and there's so much talent. So, Nate, thank you so much again for being on the podcast. This was a very, very interesting conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It went a little bit off track, but
yeah, we kind of took the side road, and we never came back to the main.
It's quite okay. We want the juicy part, and we want to hear your voice. You're not going to be silenced like banning the books.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much again, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, Nate, for sharing with our listeners your incredible artistic journey. Please follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. We are proud to be broadcasting from Jolt Radio Miami. Shout out to John and our sound technician, Rafa. Have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you on the next episode of Write Your Narrative, a South Florida Street Art podcast.